Okay, welcome again, everybody. My name is Christine Biglin. I'm with St. Mary's County Library. I do also have Kimberly Fields here with me, who is one of my coworkers also at St. Mary's County Library. She and I are going to be starting to share the hosting of this program. So sometimes it will be me, sometimes it will be Kimberly. And tonight we are joined by Barb Whipkey, who is the owner of Wild Birds Unlimited in Lexington Park and LaPlata. And we are going to be learning about winter bird feeding. Welcome, Barb.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hopefully you're sitting home where it's nice and toasty warm. It has been a beast out there, and I'm sure you're noticing lots of unreal, crazy activity at your bird feeders like you have never seen before. You are probably seeing your birds like really going at each other right now, almost like they do during nesting season when they get pretty aggressive with each other. And that's just that survival mode has kicked in for them. So that basically going at each other to make sure that they get enough food. With the drought we had this year, food was not very plentiful for them anyway. You know, if you find an oak tree, you'll find that most of the acorns didn't set on, which means the blue jays and the squirrels also, unfortunately, are very hungry. If you check out the holly bushes, you'll find most of them did not bear fruit this year. So nature was just not very helpful. So now add to that all this snow we had on top of it. Now this extremely cold weather is really making it tough on the birds. So little did we know when we planned this talk how beneficial it was going to be. So I'm going to screen share here and we're going to hop to it so that we have plenty of time at the end for questions. Oops, my screen share is turned off, Christine. Okay, here we go. Okay, so winter bird feeding. We're going to talk about how to turn a dreary backyard into a winter wonderland for the birds. And in this case, your feeders may be the difference between survival for the birds. So who are we going to see this year? You're going to have all of your usual visitors, your cardinals, your tufted titmice, your goldfinches. You're probably seeing a crazy number of goldfinches right now. The goldfinches will look a little bit different than what you normally see. In the summertime, we're used to seeing goldfinches in that pretty bright yellow plumage. Right now, when they're visiting, they're in more of a muted, almost olive drab plumage. But lots and lots of goldfinches have been there the last 4 or 5 days. Your downy woodpeckers, your Carolina wrens, red-bellied woodpeckers. Of course, those Carolina chickadees are there all the time, every morning. First thing in the morning, they're the ones that wake you up with all that loud singing. The house finches and the blue jays. But we also have some northern friends that are here for the winter. They come every winter. On the left is our white-throated sparrow. You'll be able to identify them by that very obvious white throat. A lot of them will also have that little yellow spot above the beak. Not all are going to have that yellow spot. So the key is to clue in and look for that white spot at the throat. And then on the right is our dark-eyed juncos. A lot of people refer to them as snowbirds, but watch for those. They tend to be often on the ground, but if you have a feeder that has a tray on it, as that one there, they will come up to your feeders. So I really encourage, if you tend to have feral cats or outdoor cats around, offering tray feeders so that you can entice them up to the feeders, keep them a little bit safer. But then a few others we're going to see. On the left there, that's a yellow-bellied sapsucker. You're going to see them. If you notice that tree, if you look at that closely, you're going to notice little peck holes there in a straight line around. That's a classic texture that you will find on trees that tells you you have a yellow belly sapsucker. So check some of your trees tomorrow if it's a little warmer. And if you see those little peck holes in a straight line, that will tell you that you have a yellow belly sapsucker that's visiting that tree. So that particular tree, I have bark butter on it, which is just a little paste on it. And that one, you can also in bark butter, you can do as I've done there and put peanuts or birdseed you can press into that. We also have it in a hot pepper formula, so the squirrels won't get into that. So that is the yellow belly sapsucker. In the middle is what we refer to as the butterbutt. The official name is yellow-rumped warbler, but if you catch those little ones from behind, they have what looks like a little pat of butter right at the back of their rump. So start watching for those. We are likely to see those start showing up at our feeders anytime. When it gets really cold, they tend to come and they're going to go for suet. Any type of suet. That happens to be suet balls there, but they will come for regular suet. In the traditional suet squares that everybody's familiar with, they'll come for that as well. On the right is a pine warbler. Those guys are here year round, but often people don't notice them until winter. They tend to blend in with our goldfinches during the summer for obvious reasons there. However, in the winter, they tend to be bright lemony yellow looking, and the only thing out there that bright. So they're a little bit more noticeable. So watch for those at your feeders. You're going to see the gray wing with the two little white stripes. So they're an insect eater also, which means they're going to come for suet, or they will come for dried mealworms as well. So watch for those little guys. And then some not so common visitors that are here for the winter with us this year. This is what we call an eruption year. On years when there is a shortage of food up north, we get to host some visitors, and this is one of those years. So we have quite a few purple finches here spending the winter with us. In the left box, that one that looks like a little chocolate bird that somebody dipped in some raspberry paint, that is our male house finch. And so they are here for the winter. And then on the right side is the female house finch. So in that tray feeder, the left one, I'm sorry, the right side, let me back up here. On the right side is the female purple finch. On the left side of that tray is the female house finch. So our house finches are here year round. The purple finches are only here on eruption winters. So quite often people believe they have purple finches all the time, when in actuality you have house finches all the time. 365 days a year, 24/7, those house finches are here. Purple finches, we are only fortunate enough to host on eruption years. So the purple one on the left is a male house finch. The lighter colored one on the right is your female house finch. But let me get this. Geez, I'm struggling tonight. On the right is your female purple finch. In the center there is the house finch female. So if you compare those two female house finches, a couple things, or the female finches, you're going to notice that that house finch has a more slender body. If you notice the purple finch, the female, she has a rounder body. She also has that parentheses that goes around her eyes. So those are a couple things you can watch for at your feeders to help you differentiate those female finches. The house finch will be slender. The purple female finch will have a rounder body. And the female purple finch will have the white eyeliner above and
Okay.
below.
Sorry to interrupt, Barb. There was just a question. If you could use your mouse to point to the ones that you're
Yeah,
talking
so
about.
this is the purple finch over here, the female purple finch. Over here is the house finch, the female. And then this is the male purple finch. Then up here is another one. They aren't showing up as plentiful as we thought they were going to. However, with this cold, the shortage of food, we still are holding out hope that we're going to see more. This is the red-breasted nuthatch. They are a very friendly little guy and gals, but they will come to your feeder. You may be out there hanging up your feeder and they may pop on to grab something to eat while you still have that feeder in your hand. So watch for those red-breasted nuthatches. They will come to suet, but they absolutely love peanut splits. That's what's in that feeder right there. So peanut, we'll talk about the foods later, but those peanut splits are a great one. When we talk peanut splits, if you look at that, that's just a peanut that's been shelled and then it's split in half. Peanut splits are a great winter food because it's really high in fat. So peanut splits are a great food to put out. They're loved by any of our nut-loving birds like chickadees, titmice, nuthatches. Even our cardinals and bluebirds are peanut lovers. So that's something to put on your shopping list is peanuts for the winter months. And then we're going to dive into what those foods are that you want to put on your shopping list right now to help the birds through. So one of the foods we have here is, if you're going to take a picture, this is a great one to take to help you out. I recommend having in your feeders 2 types from each section. You don't necessarily have to have our brand of foods. I'm going to go over what's in those brands so you can look, if you shop elsewhere, you can look for equivalent type foods. So our winter super blend is, this food has sunflower chips, pecans, peanuts, tree nuts. So it's basically sunflower chips and a whole lot of nuts in there. And then it has bark butter bits, which is a little suet nugget. And then it also has safflower in there, which is another high-fat food. And then it has calcium added into it. So again, if you hear that theme there, you're looking for high-fat foods. So nuts, peanuts, suets, all that high-fat stuff. Number 2 on the list is peanuts. So you can add in those peanut splits that I pointed out in that last video. Peanut splits are great. You can also do peanuts in the shell. The blue jays and the little tufted titmice love, love, love peanuts in the shell. Of course, that's if you have a pole that has a baffle on it. If you don't, the squirrels will really appreciate that as well. Of course, they're struggling this year too. So I know many of our customers who do have squirrel-proofed feeding stations have this year started temporarily feeding the squirrels to help them through also since they're struggling. Tree Nutty Plus and No Mess Plus and Choice. Those are another couple of our seeds that have, well, I'll break down the first 2. The Tree Nutty Plus and No Mess Plus are sunflower chips. They both have fruits in those. They both have peanuts and tree nuts, and they both have those suet nuggets in them as well. So those, again, that reoccurring theme here. The sunflower for your seed-eating birds, those nuts for the high fat, the suet nuggets for more suet and high fat foods, and then the berries. Again, with the berries not setting on a lot of bushes this year, we're trying to offer them some extra berries as well. So those, look for those types of foods in your foods. Choice is another option. That one has some black oil sunflower in it, has some of that peanuts in it, some safflower as well. Safflower also is one of the favorite foods of the cardinals. So any of those type foods are good. Then when we jump down to the suet area, so we have birds that are seed lovers and birds that are insect eaters. So that's why you really want to be feeding at least 2 from the seed section up above and 2 from the suet section. Birds not only have a favorite yard, they have a favorite feeder. So by offering 2 types of food from each section, you're more apt to have something that those birds are going to like in your yard. So when we get to suet, we have the suet cakes that I already showed. And again, if your pole system isn't squirrel proof, we also have a hot pepper variety. Suet cylinders are just something that looks like this, but it's in a fat form. The suet balls, they were in one of the pictures. You probably saw that when we were flipping through. I've mentioned bark butter bits a couple times, but these are the ones that are in a lot of the foods. And then bark butter is the one, the paste that I talked about that is on the tree. So just multiple forms. The other plus with that bark butter is putting it on trees. A lot of birds that will never come to a bird feeder will stop by and grab some of that bark butter off a tree. So again, the bigger variety of food you have, the more variety of birds you're going to touch. And then a few other things that I recommend adding. I talked about how many goldfinches we're seeing. I had a customer say to me a couple days ago, I'm not exaggerating. I know I have at least 50 goldfinch. And I said, I'm sure you're not. It's a crazy number of goldfinch out there right now. They are struggling to find food. Mealworms are another good one. We have them live and dry. You can find them a lot of places. You don't necessarily have to shop here to find them. And then the cylinders, I showed you the suet ones, but you can also get seed ones. They are just something like this. They have a hole in the middle, and then you just drop them on a feeder. Cool thing with seeds is those birds stay around longer, so you get to spend more time watching them. So I have several of these right out my window so that I can watch them a little bit longer. Okay, and then what type of feeders do you want? So feeders like this on the left here, this one with all the holes, these are going to feed your clinging birds. So some of our birds, like our woodpeckers and that, prefer to cling when they eat. So if you can offer a feeder like that, you're going to attract more of those style birds. But with that said, you want to make sure that you have a feeder like this with perches for those birds like those goldfinches and ones that prefer to eat perched. This is one of those cylinders that I mentioned here. And you can see that's a perfect example of how that woodpecker prefers to eat this way. In the center is a tray feeder. I mentioned that if you have a lot of stray cats and outdoor cats, offering a tray feeder is going to invite those ground feeding birds up to your feeders. So tray feeder is a great way to bring more birds up to your feeders, but it also can be a safer way to feed if you do have a lot of predators on the ground. So that's a tray feeder there in the middle. On the right-hand side, this is a style of squirrel-proof feeders. So if you're hanging your feeder where squirrels can get to it, if you're hanging it from a tree, from a deck, something like that, you'll want to look into a squirrel-proof option or a seed with hot pepper in it so that the squirrels will leave that alone. On the left, this is one of the types of feeders that you would put those suet cakes in. You can also get a style something like this. If you notice, this is where the square would go, but then down below here, you have this tail hanging. Birds like our woodpeckers use their tail for balance. So with this, they can hang up here to eat, and then they use that tail prop to balance themselves while they're eating. So a suet feeder with a tail prop is going to help you bring in some of the larger woodpeckers. And then here in the middle, the little Carolina wren, that's those early morning singers that are waking you up. He's got the little windblown look going on there. Little dishes like this you can use to add those mealworms or any kind of specialty little treats in those. And then majorly important is keeping your feeders dry. If you can add, I know a lot of stores sell these tops as squirrel baffles. Those are not squirrel baffles. A squirrel will come right around those. They can also chew those. They're made out of plastics. Those are meant to be weather guards to help keep your seed dry. You're spending all this money on seed, so it's important that you keep it dry. If it gets wet, the birds won't eat it. It will mold. And by keeping it dry, the birds will continue to feed when it is raining or snowing. So look into getting weather guards for your feeders so you can protect your investment. And then water is majorly important. So for the obvious reason, birds need to drink. No matter what time of the year it is, they still need to drink. But even more important in the winter months, they need to keep those feathers clean. If you notice, a lot of times when it's cold, the birds all look fat. That's because they're fluffing up their feathers to form pockets of insulation. Kind of works like a down coat with those little pockets to keep you warm. That's what they're doing. So this is a picture in my backyard with a heated bird bath. If you stick your hand in that bird bath, it is extremely cold. It's thermostatically controlled, so it's just keeping it above freezing. We don't want them out there taking a little sauna. We just want them to be able to drink and bathe, keep those feathers clean so that they can fluff them up and stay warm. If you already have a bird bath, we have heaters that can, or de-icers that can be added to them to keep them clean. And then shelter. Just a good old birdhouse is great. Leave your birdhouses up year round so the birds can use them. After the last nesting each year, clean them out so that they can shelter in there. If you were to peek into your birdhouse during the night, you might find a mixture of types of birds in there. You might find a family of 6, 7, 8 bluebirds all nestled down in there sleeping in it. You may never even know they're using it because they tend to go in after dark and are back out first thing in the morning, because in the winter months, birds need to feed from sun up to sundown to keep enough calories going to keep them alive to get through the next night. Little pockets like that are great. That happens to be just a little roosting pocket like that. That's a Carolina wren that I talked about, those early morning risers. I have these on my front porch, and I have a pair that sleeps in them year round. Every evening we watch them go in and go to bed. I've also got a couple of these gourds that a pair of them sleep in. These are just dried gourd that are hand painted, decorative hanging there, but they'll sleep in those as well. Any kind of shelters like that are going to help them out right now. Originally with those shelters, I put up one winter and my plan was to take them down in the summer, but then I found that they use them year round to sleep in, so now they hang there year round. So basically, a good variety of foods and a good variety of feeders is going to bring you a good variety of birds. And then you can just sit back and enjoy the show. So with that, I'm going to take this off screen share and we will see what questions you have.
Okay. I think you did touch on this, but let's just review. Vicky has some blue jays and wanted to know what to feed them.
So their favorite food is peanuts in the shell. They love peanuts in the shell, but they will eat any of those foods that had the nuts in them as well. So they prefer the larger nuts. They'll go with the straight peanuts out of the shell, but they prefer more bang for their bite. So they're the peanuts in the shell or foods that have larger nuts in them.
Um, Now, I assume you cannot use peanuts that you would eat,
Yes.
right?
So you want to make sure that you're getting the unsalted peanuts. Yeah, don't go to Texas Roadhouse or wherever and bring an extra bag of peanuts home with you. We don't need birds with high blood pressure.
Okay. Somebody commented that they have a lot of cardinals too,
Yeah,
I've been
so
seeing.
cardinals this past summer started nesting early, as a lot of birds did. We had that surprise early spring and the birds got ahead of schedule. So they did have a lot of failed nestings then when we had that cold spell.
Mm.
So they did nest a little bit late into the summer. So it was a really, really good year for cardinals. So cardinals love safflower. They love black oil sunflower shells, and they are also big peanut lovers. We actually just got in a cardinal confetti blend. Has anybody tried the cardinal confetti blend yet?
Yep. I
Yeah.
got the cylinder that goes in my
Um,
cylinder feeder, and that's very nice.
I helped test that in the spring and summer when it was being made. And so it was during nesting and breeding season, and it was a big hit in my yard.
Speaking of nesting, because you were saying it was like a little off, when is nesting usually all done? Because you had said clean out your feeders when nesting is
Yeah.
all over. So
So
when is that?
the last nesters of the year are actually goldfinches, and they nest August into September, but they're not cavity nesters. So they build a nest in a bush or tree. So our last nesters would typically be our bluebirds, and they finish up in August. And so hopefully you'll be watching your bluebirds and you'll know when they're nesting and when they fledge and everything. And we'll get into that in our next talk, but you'll be watching so you'll know when they're nesting, when they're fledging, so you'll know exactly the day to clean out your nest box.
Okay. Um, how do you tell the difference between a downy woodpecker and a yellow-bellied?
So yellow belly is going to be much larger than the downy, and the white on it is going to look like it's a dirty white. The yellow belly is normally I would say they don't come to the feeders, but this year they are coming to cylinder feeders. And so they look, when they're at a feeder, they are going to be like flat against your feeder and they're just much wider uh, than the others. But definitely they don't have that clean white that the downy has, but they're also much larger. They're closer to the size of the red belly woodpecker, if you know what the red belly woodpecker looks like. So they're much larger than the downy.
Do we have hairy woodpeckers?
We
Because those look
do.
like,
So
okay, they're
yeah,
just a little bigger than downies, right?
they are. They're a couple inches larger than the downies.
And is that the only difference, really? Like they're just bigger?
There's a couple other differences. The easiest one I think to tell is their beak size on the hairy. If you catch the profile of a hairy, that beak is almost as long as the side of its head. So if you really
Oh,
look at the beak on that hairy, the beak almost looks too long for the head.
okay. Um, okay, Erin says I have a robin-sized sparrow-looking bird at my feeder with a longer beak. Ideas? A giant
What
sparrow.
what it what is the color? Is
Erin,
it
you can unmute if you just want
does
to
it
ask.
does it have a speckled chest?
I'm sorry. Yeah, it has a speckled chest, and I have looked through my book, and it's much bigger than a sparrow. And I'm new to this, so I'm green. I
That's
don't
okay.
know them all.
Does it have a longer tail?
Yes.
Okay, so it's one of two things, but with that longer beak, my guess is it's going to be a brown thrasher.
Okay.
Is
So
it
yeah,
eating seed or suet?
Seed.
Seed,
Usually on the ground.
usually on the ground.
well, that's all we have right now. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let me see.
we're
Yeah,
kind of
so I would look up two things. I would look up brown thrasher.
I got a book.
Okay, good. And then the other would be a hermit thrush, since you said it's on the ground. That
Yeah.
makes me,
Somebody also said a thrush. I didn't know we had those.
yeah, the only ones we have in the winter is a hermit thrush. So since you're saying the ground, that makes me jump to hermit thrush instead.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Always fun to ID something in the book.
I know. Yeah.
Okay.
The
Uh,
hermit, one other quick thing on him. If it's a hermit thrush, you'll notice a rusty tail.
okay. Um, Jerry or Ann asked, will squirrels get to the bark butter if you spread it on the tree?
It will, but use the hot pepper and they'll leave it alone. I have watched them run laps around the tree, running through the hot pepper bark butter, and they just will run laps through it, clueless that it's something they might want to eat.
Yeah, that's interesting. You've said before with the hot pepper that mammals can taste it, but the birds can't. So that's why
Correct.
the birds don't mind.
Yes.
Okay. Darlene said she has a few of the mourning doves and a few grackles. Oh, I haven't seen any grackles lately.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, I know. They just make a mess and they eat so much. So I'm happy that they're not too
Right.
often. Um, oh, and Molly suggested maybe a female red-winged blackbird for Aaron's bird
It could be.
because
Yeah.
those are that size. That's a good
Hmm.
thought.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
All right. Oh, okay, those were the comments that people were putting in there. Um, oh, could you show the bark butter feeder that has all those little holes drilled into it? Do you have one of those? Because I have one of those that
Yeah. So I
I
have
yeah,
one here. We have a couple different styles, but here's one.
that's the
And
one I was
so,
talking about.
yep, with this one, you can just spread that bark butter. It's two-sided, and you can spread that right in there. And then your clinging birds, like those woodpeckers, can cling right on this. But then there's also a perch so that the ones that aren't able to cling can perch. We have one hanging out here, and we have a mockingbird that's getting on it
Oh,
nonstop even and eating.
because I just got one of those a month or two ago,
Uh-huh.
and they didn't take to it at first, and I thought maybe my bark butter was old or something, but then once they got used to it, it's like cleaned
Yeah.
out very quickly now.
And sometimes in the beginning, when you're using bark butter, if they don't find it right away, you can press some seed into it, something their birds find their
Oh,
food based on sight. So you can press some seed, something they're used to eating in there. And so then they're
oh,
like, oh, there's my bird seed. And then they're like, yum, what's this
yeah,
stuff here?
and that's good too.
Yeah.
Okay. Liz asked, what's the best way to entice bluebirds to eat from the feeder?
So bluebirds aren't able to crack a shell. So you want to make sure that you have the right food for them. So that needs to be things like the mealworms, those suet nuggets that we talked about. We do actually have a blend that's designed specifically for them as well, if you didn't want to mix up your own mixture. This one is, the ingredients in it is those bark butter bits, dried mealworms, sunflower chips, peanuts, cranberries, and raisins. So a mixture of those types of food are what you're looking for them. But one of the things with bluebirds, a lot of people will put out black oil sunflower chips, black oil sunflower, and wonder why they never get bluebirds. And that's because they're not able to crack that shell.
Mm.
So as soon as you start offering foods that they can eat, that will bring them in. The best time to entice bluebirds is right now. the winter months, because they're typically a berry and insect eater. There's no insects out there right now, so you're not competing with nature, and there's very few berries. We hear daily right now, I've never had bluebirds before, and I have a lot right now. So if you ever wanted bluebirds, tomorrow's the day to start trying to bring the bluebirds in. They're also a water-loving bird, so also getting water out there. And then to keep them there is get you a bluebird house up, because they start looking for nesting sites in February. So get a bluebird house set up. So now you've been feeding them, you've had water for them, then they wander over and they're like, oh, wait, there's a house. Well, why do I even need to leave? Everything I need is right here. So they nest there, and then you've started your bluebird population.
Oh, and that's a perfect segue because next month, that's our topic, it's Become a Bluebird Landlord. That will be on Thursday, February 27th, at the same time, 6:30 to 7:30. I send out a follow-up email to everyone who registered today for this program, and I will have a link to that so that you can sign up for it if you want to. And then we'll find out even more about bluebirds. Okay, I think that's all the questions that I have in the chat. Um, in case I don't think I missed any, but if I did, and just anyway, you're invited to unmute yourself if you just want to ask instead of typing it into the chat. Oh, Barb and I were talking before the show while you're thinking if you have any more questions. Their Project Feeder Watch is going on right now, and that's like a backyard science, citizen science contribution program. I will send a link to that also. That goes through April 30th. So you can track how much activity you have at your bird feeder, and you send it. I believe it's part of the Cornell Ornithology Lab that they track all of that. So that's a way to get involved. Okay. There were a couple compliments in the chat that it's very informative. Thank you.
So,
Oh,
okay, question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So like you say you're supposed to clean your birdhouses out each year, and then you say you had a couple that are occupied like year round. So especially like the gourd, you gotta clean the gourd out. You just turn it over and shake it out.
Yeah, so the gourds are typically, they use the gourds just for roosting, usually, but on occasion, some of them will decide to, when they're roosting, they usually don't put anything in. Roosting is, just to differentiate, roosting is just sleeping in them or using it for shelter. So usually when they're roosting, they don't put anything in it. I'm glad you asked that question, Erin, because you can put some bedding chips in there, like some pine or cedar, pine bedding in there for them to give them a little cushion. So come late February, after we get through the worst of the cold, then you would shake that out. If it's something that's suitable for nesting, so like the bluebird house I showed. If somebody does decide to nest in it, like we did have a Carolina wren one time that nested in our gourd. So in that case, we just used a metal hanger, scraped everything out, and then just hosed it out good to let it dry. Spray it with a little bit of Clorox water, hose it out again really good, and let it dry. Your houses, we recommend on the houses that you're using houses that you are able to open up. And so when you open them, you're able to just clean everything out, little bit of bleach and water, spray it good in there. If it's nasty, scrub it a little bit. Usually if it's bluebirds nesting, it usually will not be dirty. They are very clean nesters. But after you've sprayed it, rinse it out again, leave it open to dry, and then close it up. This time of year, I put some of that pine bedding in all of my bluebird houses so that they do have some extra bedding. What I do is watch, and as soon as I see my bluebirds starting to take the pine bedding out, I wait until they're away and I go and help them and clean it out, because I know that they're getting ready at that point to nest. And so I just give them a helping hand, because they're going to be using up so much energy building the nest. that I made that mess in their nest, so I help them out a little bit on that.
Okay. Having to do with bird houses, how do you keep snakes out?
Great question. So can you pull that whole system out of there for me? Hang on one second. I'm going to pull something up here. So I'm actually the St. Mary's County Coordinator for the Maryland Bluebird Society. So we ask if you are going to put up a bluebird house that you please put it on, mount it on a pole system, and then put this baffle. This is a predator guard that's going to keep raccoons and snakes out of it. So they are our biggest predators of bluebirds. What will happen is the snake will go straight up it to try to get to the eggs, the babies. The raccoons aren't able to go up. It's also going to keep squirrels out as well. They're not our big predators of nesting birds. That one's really easy, just screws in the ground. The little squirrel baffles, like is on this one, will not work. The ones that flare out, the baffles that flare out like this will not work either. Raccoons have thumbs, so they will grab it, swing right around and go up. Snakes can bridge over, so they will come up the pole, bridge and go right around. So it has to be those long stovepipe style baffles to keep the snakes and raccoons out.
What material is it made of?
That's made of steel.
So it's just smooth steel,
No, it's a textured.
like corrugated?
It's a what would you call that?
Does it look like it's beat up with a hammer?
Huh?
Does it look like it's beat up with a hammer?
No.
I'll stop in the
It's
place store tomorrow and
there's
look.
a coating on it, a powder coating on it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now moving to feeders, how often should you clean those and should you use diluted bleach?
Yeah, so feeders should be cleaned every couple weeks. You can just clean them in some dishwashing liquid, rinse them well, and then dip them in a solution of 1 part bleach, 9 parts water. Dip them in there, rinse them very well, let them dry, and then refill them.
All right. I think that's all the questions that we have.
Okay, sorry, I got one more real quick.
Oh,
Back to the
great.
That's
bluebird-
okay.
Back to the bluebird houses. So you have that thing, the snake you turn, the raccoon you turn, all that. I see it has a mount like on the top. Like, is there anything that says you couldn't like put 2 to maybe 3 bluebird houses on top of that?
Yeah, bluebirds won't share.
No,
They want to
I'm
make
talking independent, like 3 independent houses that are just kind of.
yeah, they won't let another pair nest next to them.
Okay.
They want to make sure that there's enough insects. Even though you've been feeding them, they don't trust you to continue feeding them.
Right.
They want to make sure that there's enough insects to cover them. So you shouldn't put bluebird houses closer than 150 yards. They need to be 150 yards apart.
Oh, wow.
If you want to put multiples up and you don't have that spacing, put 1 in the front yard, 1 in the side yard, 1 in the backyard.
Okay.
Because they are going to defend that house if another bluebird tries to come in. With that said, mine are closer together, but I will never get multiple bluebirds in them. I'll get a bluebird in this one, a chickadee in that one, and a tufted titmouse in that one, maybe a Carolina wren over there. They will let those birds eat there because they know, or nest there. They know their primary diet isn't going to be insects because they eat more seeds and things like that. But they're not going to share. Now, if you had tree swallows, you could put a bluebird house here and a tree swallow house back to back. They will let them share because tree swallows eat flying insects. So it's competing against different things.
It's nice they know each other so well.
I know, right?
Okay.
Barb,
Yes,
you you said that the bluebirds will pile up within a house to keep warm. I only have one bluebird house because I didn't have a lot of room to space them out. If I put up a couple more, would other birds be doing the same thing during cold weather?
they absolutely will. Even downy woodpeckers will go in them. Downy woodpeckers, chickadees, titmice, Carolina wrens. We have a bluebird nesting box that has a camera in it now. And I've been watching, I've had chickadees, Carolina wrens, chickadees, Carolina wrens, and tufted titmice all go in mine. So yeah, you can put, and the same thing as what I have. Then come nesting season, you may have chickadees nest in one, tufted titmice nest in the other. So they won't go to waste.
All right. Well, just checking my notes. I think I got everything out there. Um, uh, one person said they did not register, like I don't have their email because they didn't register. So if there's anybody else listening who like maybe somebody sent the link to you and you didn't register on the library website, put your email in the chat and then I'll be able to send you the follow-up email. So we'll have a few links in there, especially the link to the next program. So thank you all for coming tonight. I think we covered everything. Barb, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
And it's always a pleasure. So good night, everybody, and I'll be sending you that follow-up email as soon as I get the chance to put it all together. Good night.